Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session of the 2026 Food System Solution Series, focusing on farmer cooperatives as catalyst for food system transformation. My name is Abyssinia Gade, and I'm a team member of the UN Food Systems Coordination Hub here at FAO. As everybody gets settled in, I would go over a few housekeeping notes for everyone. First, note that this session is being recorded and will be shared widely after the event. You can see the privacy clause that we will be sharing in the chat soon. The chat will remain open throughout the whole session, so feel free to introduce yourself, share reflections, and other questions you may have. In addition, we also have the Q&A feature also available for this session. If you'd like to pause a question for the Q&A segment of today's webinar, please submit it there, and we'll do our best to address all your questions by the end of the session. With all this being said, now it's my pleasure to hand the floor to Ms. Mia Madsen, a policy officer here at the UN Food Systems Coordination Hub. Mia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Abyssinia, for this introduction. And on behalf of the UN Food Systems Coordination Hub, welcome to today's Food Systems Solution webinar, which is focused on farmer cooperatives as catalyst for food systems transformation. My name is Mia Madsen. I work as a policy officer at the Hub, and I will be moderating the session today. So as you know, these webinars are open to the public, and they aim at fostering a broader engagement on critical issues related to food systems transformation. Today's webinar is a collaboration between the Hub and the World Farmers Organization. And during the webinar today, we will explore the role of farmer cooperatives and farmer organizations as key drivers for food systems transformation. And to achieve this, we have an exciting lineup of speakers with us today. It's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Luisa Volpe, who is an advocacy, policy, and partnership lead at the World Farmer Organization. And she will deliver a keynote presentation highlighting farmer cooperatives from a global perspective, focusing on their role in shaping international policy and enabling cooperative-led food systems transformation. So I'm very happy to introduce you to Luisa. The floor is yours.
Mia, thank you very much. And thank you also for organizing this webinar, which is a very precious occasion to show how food producers in general and food producers cooperatives and farmers organized structures can actually contribute to the transformation of food systems. I'm very pleased to make this presentation to you because the World Farmers Organization has been engaged in the Food System Summit preparation since the beginning. Together with other farmers' organizations, and has proudly represented its farmers' network in all the developments and the steps of the Food System Summit. Abyssinia, sorry, because you have the burden of going ahead with the presentation. Thank you very much for that. So if you can go to the next slides. I would like to say a little bit of what WFO is. WFO is a global farmers organization. Our members are national farmers organizations from 55 countries, and we are also composed in regional constituencies. Regional constituencies are divided as Africa, Asia, Europe, Latin America, North America, Oceania, and each constituency also expresses the representation in a board member. What is the main mandate of the WFO? It is that of linking the national level with the global level, and also increasing the capacity of farmers' organizations at national level through informing them on what's going on at global level. And under this principle, we have structured our work also in the Food System Summit steps and various chapters. Next slides. As you can see, we represent different farmers groups that are national farmers organizations broad in scope, but also youth and women organizations, commodities groups, but also transnational farmers organizations. In this capacity, we have facilitated the full network that you see described here to contribute to the process of food systems. Next slide. Okay. So, we were very proud, let me say, of how the process of the Food System Summit was led, because together with governments and multilateral governmental organizations, food producers, together with other stakeholders, were involved, let me say, with a peer role. No, so we could also contribute with what food producers were able to say to the new agenda on food systems, and the voice of food producers was actually taken into consideration in a way that we could really express points of views that were taken into the food producers declaration and then in the outcome documents of the food systems. Also thanks to the support of IFADs, the food producers organizations of the world, global, regional, and some national levels, joined hands together and prepared what we have called the Food Producers Declaration. Why? Because here I have copied a couple of paragraphs of the declaration, because we shared views on the role of food producers, their organized structures, including cooperatives, as the backbone of our society, but with a number of challenges that were to be addressed. In fact, it says, despite providing critical nutrition and livelihoods to billions of people, food producers, are particularly in developing countries, are amongst the world's poorest, hungriest, and most marginalized sector of the society. And for this, we thought that as a category, we could deserve a better place, let's say, in the global discussions. So, fruit producers from different corners of the world have come together to present solutions as one collective voice, which was by itself an innovative process. These solutions were the results of a series of Food System Summit independent dialogues that we organized together, conducted by the organizations representing food producers in the context of the preparation of the United Nations Food System Summits. As you can see here already, the role of farmers' organized structures is evident, because it was actually thanks to the producers' organizations that we could cooperate with the IFADs, with FAO, with the UN in New York, and with the other stakeholders that were involved in the preparation process of the summits. Next slide. So, how do we as producers organization see cooperatives as drivers of solutions in food systems? Mainly, it's at two different levels. The first one concerns the role of food producers within the value chain. And as food producers, we really thought that empowering farmer structures could really benefit the rebalancing of power in the food value chains. And in fact, according to the views of food producers organizations, cooperatives can grant equitable access to markets for the farmers at fairer price. And that's why also in the declaration there was a huge expectation from the food producers that associations and cooperatives of farmers were to be supported and incentivized. The second, let's say, pillar is what cooperatives can make as services to its members, which is mainly improving their livelihoods, offer easier access to markets, help defend their rights and needs during the allocation negotiations, the distribution of information, technology, trainings, extension services, but also support food producers in building partnerships with other stakeholders. So the cooperatives for the farmers are those how do I say, those natural structures that can really support them in being represented in negotiations, especially with other actors in the value chain, as well as in policy making processes. Next slide. Okay, so why cooperatives are can play this role? Because cooperatives are, as farmers have defined them, cooperatives are democratic groups where food producers have agreed on a voluntary basis and actually with a strong commitment to participate, which means that it's not a top-down system. It's a system created by the producers themselves. So there is a strong ownership also of the food producers' cooperatives. And in fact, here I try to identify 4 reasons why cooperatives may have these characteristics. The first one is for their structure and functioning, that agricultural cooperatives may really empower farmers by increasing their role in poverty reduction at the level of the community, in improving food security, and contributing, of course, to the development of the whole community itself because they help creating jobs and generating incomes. Always for the structure that these cooperatives have, they are also able to reduce risks to, let's say, increase the risk mitigation capacity of farmers. In fact, the cooperatives can help farmers to cope with challenges that affect the communities that may be caused by climate change, resource scarcity, food insecurity, malnutrition, food loss, and waste. Now we can see this is actually very linked to also the actual situation with the fertilizer availability reduction that farmers are facing. And we really believe that cooperatives can support as a stronger structure to, don't want to say to fill in those gaps, but at least to rebalance the availability of inputs among the farmers. Then, of course, through cooperatives, farmers get power as they improve their access to services and resources, including knowledge, information and technology, innovation, and they can also learn to utilize in the best manner to maximize their incomes. And lastly, cooperatives can truly play a key role in mobilizing farmers, in shortening the value chain, as I was telling before, and creating also a closer link between farmers and communities, as well as creating economies of scale for the farmers as they join efforts in the production and marketing of their own products. And then I think I will close with a final slides. Abyssinia, thank you. Okay, So why it is important then to invest in food producers cooperatives if we really want to make a sustainable transition of food systems? One, because farmers can contribute to the implementation of the 3 pillars of sustainability, and that's what we want in food systems, that are economic, social, and environmental, for all the functions that I explained before. Secondly, because cooperatives are those producer structures that can make farmers advance and develop in getting to the third millennium way of working. And so also private extension services can support in increasing farmers' capacity, for example, in managing innovation, in data retrieval and repository that we know it's now at the backbone of any economy. And then, of course, why? Because if you invest on food producers cooperatives, you have invested in the full community. And so the community is stronger also to respond to challenges and disasters that may not be expected. And then this is something that was very much promoted by our farmers. There is also a way in which farmers, through the cooperatives and getting together, can also contribute to increase the agricultural capacity of producing renewable and green energy. Mia, I'll stop here. I think I have gone overboard as well, so I'm sorry, but thank you very much, and I'm open to questions, if any. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luisa, for this interesting presentation. And thanks a lot for taking us back also to the UN Food System Summit process and the involvement of the food producers in the summit process, leading to this producers declaration that you mentioned. Some of the things you highlighted, the role of food producers within the value chain and the importance of rebalancing the power, bringing them along as key stakeholders there. You also mentioned the cooperative model and how it, through its democratic structure, can support its members and mobilize farmers and producers, improving their access to services, knowledge, and technology. A lot of very interesting solutions for smallholder producers globally. We'll come back to you a bit later with some questions, of course. But with this, I want to move to our next speakers as well. So we have a panel with 2 speakers following Luisa's keynote presentation. And these 2 panelists will share some insights from regional and country level examples of working with farmer organizations and cooperatives, highlighting farmers, producers' role in advancing inclusive and sustainable resilient food systems, and also sharing some lessons on scaling up solutions. I just wanted, before I move to the next speaker then, to also encourage all the participants here that if you have any questions that you would like to pose, there are 2 options. There is a Q&A function in the Zoom call where you can pose questions and the panelists can also respond to them directly. Another option for you is to post your question in the chat, and I will pick up on those later. So feel free to engage with us through that way. So moving on, it's my pleasure to invite Ms. Elizabeth Nsimnala, President of the Eastern African Farmers Federation. She's also board member of the Pan-Africa Farmers Organization. And Elizabeth will talk a little bit about her work in the region with mobilizing and working with farmer organizations. So I'm hoping that Elizabeth, you don't have any technical issues. Let's give the floor to you and we see how we go about it. Over to you, Elizabeth. We'll see.
I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Yes, yeah. I'm sorry, I had a technical problem, so my Wi-Fi went off because of electricity, but I'm able to connect on mobile data. Let me first of all start by appreciating the organizers of this webinar, the UNFSS Hub and the World Farmers Organization for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to represent farmers and cooperators in this webinar. So as introduced, my name is Elizabeth Nsimadara. I'm the president of the Eastern Africa Farmers Federation and a board member of the Pan-Africa Farmers Organization. But most importantly is the role that I play at national level in my national cooperative organization, which is the National Alliance of Agricultural Cooperatives in Uganda, where I serve as the advisory chair. Madam Moderator, allow me, first of all, extend my appreciation to Louisa for setting the scene, but also for giving a background of our role in the UN Food System Summit 2021, our participation at the pre-summit and independent dialogues that resulted into the Food Producers Declaration, but also noting our involvement in both the +2 and +4 stock taking, representing the farmer's voice. Like I mentioned, I represent the Eastern Africa Farmers Federation, and it's a regional network with a footprint in 10 countries of Eastern Africa, representing 25 plus million smallholder farmers. And of course, over than 60% of these numbers are members of the cooperatives. We were established in 2001. And what we do as an organization is to drive agricultural transformation by participating in regional policy formulation under frameworks like the East Africa Community, COMESA, IGAD, and also the Africa Union, and making sure that we have farmer-friendly policies and they are implemented, for example, through the CADAP and through our own farmer championed policy, the East Africa Cooperative Societies Bill in 2021, which we pushed as a private members bill and was passed by IARA, though still waiting for assent by the different heads of states. But also beyond political advocacy, we empower rural communities through capacity building, market access, digital innovations, like our e-granary platform and extension services that promote agribusiness and integration of youth and women into agriculture value chains. We also play a vital role in building climate resilience, in helping small-scale producers adopt sustainable farming practices to mitigate environmental challenges while strengthening food security. But I would like to point out how the cooperative model has become a vehicle for smallholders in East Africa and how farmer cooperatives really serve as a catalyst for food systems transformation. And I want to mention that within the Eastern Africa Farmers Federation network, the cooperative model operates as our primary socio-economic vehicle by transitioning what we call the isolated small-scale growers into integrated commercial units. They also serve as a market catalyst, and cooperatives actually help to dismantle the systemic barriers to credit, to technology, and regional trade, directly impacting millions of smallholder farmers across East Africa. If I can move a little bit to really unpack on how it is a vehicle for smallholder farmers, in terms of isolation, moving from isolation to scale, you realize that smallholders in East Africa often struggle with high overhead costs. They have limited bargaining power. And of course, we operate under fractured value chains. So the Federation Cooperatives model alters this dynamic by acting as an organizational and resource vehicle. And this is done through what we would call the bulk aggregation, where cooperatives establish centralized storage and bulking hubs. And this really eliminates the tedious door-to-door farm collection, and it also attracts commercial off-takers who require large and uniform volumes. In terms of input subsidization and purchasing power, we've also seen this by leveraging corrective purchasing, where cooperatives aggregate their production and they do bulk purchase. Cooperatives are able, by doing this, they're able to secure massive discounts on, for example, high quality seeds, on machinery and fertilizer. But they also serve as official institutional conduits for state subsidized inputs by bypassing open market price surges. We've seen this in our different countries where the state, for example, is offering subsidies in terms of seeds and fertilizer, and they prefer using cooperatives and farmers organizations that are organized than using individual farmers. But also they help in terms of risk sharing, but also asset building. By pooling financial resources, it allows rural smallholder farmers to co-own value-adding assets. And this is common, for example, with the dairy cooperatives, where they put their resources together. They're able to procure like milk coolers. Some that are in variation are able to procure processing machinery, or those that are in cereals are able to procure delivery trucks. And that would otherwise be entirely unaffordable if, for example, farmers were to do that at individual level. Let me touch a little bit on the catalyst to transformation. And by doing this, we are accelerating modern agribusiness. So just beyond acting as a tool for basic logistics, as a federation, we are aligned farmer cooperatives, and they act as a structural catalyst to upgrade what we call traditional family farming into a thriving professional enterprise. And this is done through digital technology adoption. It is easier, for example, when we are working with cooperatives. So for us as a federation, we use cooperatives to rapidly scale innovations like the e-Grand mobile platform that I mentioned. So instead of onboarding farmers one by one, the platform utilizes the cooperative network to deploy digital extension advice, for example, to be able to map the acreage and to electronically track market price grain supplies. But also in terms of financial inclusion, many agricultural cooperatives function in tandem with savings, for example, and credit cooperative organizations. And these cooperatives operate as financial guarantors for their members. It uses, for example, documented seasonal harvest delivery records as informal collateral to unlock the different credit lines, the equipment loans, and crop insurance policies. And finally, in terms of cross-border and policy influence, as cooperatives, we provide smallholders with a unified and collective voice to shape national policies. I think Ruisa already also touched on this. And this is done at a macro level. So as a federation, we leverage this aggregated cooperative bloc to be able to negotiate what we call farmer-friendly regional trade frameworks. For example, within the East Africa community, at COMESA markets, we've tried to help over 1.5 million smallholders to securely move maize, to move beans, and to move fresh horticulture across the national borders. Let me hand over to you, Mia. I hope I'll have another opportunity maybe to bring some more examples. Back to you, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, also for sharing with us some background on the Eastern Africa Farmers Federation and the really important work that you are doing in the region. You highlighted that cooperative model has become a vehicle for smallholders in Eastern Africa, and some of the examples that you mentioned very briefly include collective action, for example, centralized storage, collective bargaining power, and also this important thing about shared risk management and piloting innovation and technology together as a cooperative. So we will get back to you with more questions for sure. I have a quick follow-up question for you before I go to the next speaker. You did mention some of the structural barriers that cooperatives do experience in East Africa. But I wanted to zoom in a little bit on the role of female cooperatives, women-led cooperatives. And I wonder, like in today's world with food systems facing climate, market, and demographic pressures, what role do you see women-led cooperatives playing over the next decade specifically? And in which way can specifically governments and UN agencies and development partners support the women-led cooperatives? Over to you for that follow-up question.
Yeah. Thank you so much for yet another opportunity, and especially speaking to women. I think, of course, a thematic which is very dear and close to my heart, having been a women's champion, especially in the agriculture sector for some time. So I just want to mention that over the next decade, women-led cooperatives are going to be very vital to making agri-food systems resilient. And they will shift from just mere production groups into key economic engines. Meaningful support there are farmers directly lower systemic barriers by providing gender disaggregated data, by expanding access to climate finance, and of course, by funding targeted capacity building programs for women. And I see the role of women-led cooperatives over the next decade as, for example, driving climate smart agriculture. We've seen women-led cooperatives as positions to become the primary catalysts to adopting climate smart agriculture, such as drought resistant crops, such as agroforestry, and also this can be done through peer-to-peer learning. They are uniquely equipped to test and scale sustainable practices that improve food security, and that one we have no doubt. Then in terms of localized market transformation as another point, rather than remaining trapped at the bottom of the value chain where we see most women, cooperatives will increasingly lead value addition. For example, the drying, processing, and packaging. In all these processes, we see majority are women. So by leveraging digital e-commerce platforms, they can connect directly with urban markets. They can help in terms of reducing post-harvest losses, but also in terms of ensuring fresher food supplies. The other point that I really want to look at is in terms of the social and economic empowerment. So beyond just doing the farming, these groups provide women with the collective bargaining power, which is required to navigate deeply entrenched patriarchal norms. We know most of our African societies are still patriarchal in nature. So we need to see how women can deeply navigate some of these norms. When women lead, they invest resources directly into family, into nutrition, into healthcare, into education for the children, but also into creating a powerful multiplier effect on community well-being. And then in terms of how these can be empowered by governments, UN agencies, and development partners beyond just tokenistic inclusion to systemic structure reforms, and the meaningful support from me and from where I sit as a woman, as a cooperative member, and as a leader in both national, regional, and continental platform, we need, first of all, to expand access to green climate finance. Climate and agriculture funds must be intentionally channeled to female farmers. We need development partners that should pioneer gender-responsive green bonds that should have de-risking funds to help cooperatives access the capital that is needed for climate resilient technology. And number two, like I mentioned, the patriarchal norms that still exist on the continent and beyond the continent, we need to reform the land tenure rights. Governments must legislate and enforce policies that grant women secure land rights. Cooperatives cannot effectively plan for a decade's worth of sustainable agriculture without long-term secure tenure. And of course, the third point is targeted capacity building. The UN agencies, the NGOs, all these must equip cooperatives and with specialized training on sustainable farming techniques. We need
I think we lost Elizabeth for the
literacy
time.
for women. We need financial management. Sorry, I had an interruptive call because I'm connected on mobile data, but I'm bringing this to close. Like I was saying that we need partnerships with the local food processors and private sector buyers, and that will help guarantee offtake. And as a final parting shot is on data-driven gender strategies. Organizations must segregate operational and climate performance data by gender. This allows the public and the private sectors to track exactly how women contribute to food systems and measure the return on investing in women leadership. Thank you, and back to you, Mia.
Thank you very much. You came with a lot of concrete examples of how to bring the road forward and support specifically women-led cooperatives in the region. And I'm sure that our other panelists also have good ideas for how to continue this. So with this, we are moving on to our next panelist, who will be looking at farmer organization, cooperative movement from a different perspective, from the European perspective. And I'm very happy to invite Mr. Umberto Di Pasqua, who is the Director of Cooperative Affairs at Copa-Cogeca. And he will be sharing, as I said, a bit on the cooperative movement in Europe, challenges, differences, and the work that Copa-Cogeca has been doing to support these farmers. So over to you, Umberto, for your intervention.
Thank you very much, Mia. Thank you very much, FAO, for organizing such inspiring event. It's always great to talk about the importance of agricultural cooperatives because, in my opinion, are the driving force to move the sectors towards the future. I have prepared a very brief PowerPoint presentation as request. Just a brief introduction about Cogeca. So next slide, please. I'm working for Copa-Cogeca. Copa-Cogeca is an organization that brings together 23 million European farmers and their family members and more than 22,000 agricultural cooperatives. The two organizations have created a common secretariat, and the common objective that we have in Brussels is to influence the EU decision-making process in order to make sure that the sector is well defended, in order to accomplish the mission of every farmer, which is to ensure that we have a viable, innovative and competitive agriculture and agri-food sectors, so that we can guarantee food security and bring delicious food on the table of European citizens and not only. Next slide, please. So when talking about the importance of agricultural cooperatives, it's really important to understand how the value chain is structured and is organized. It resonates a bit what the previous speaker said from a different context, but we clearly see the same problems. So in Europe, we have about 10 million very small and fragmented agriculture holdings. as I said, in the hands of about 23 million farmers and their family members. And on the other hand, we have only few and consolidated large food and drinks retailers. They dominate the market. They act as a gatekeeper to reach 500 million individual consumers. And on top of that, we are assisting in Europe nowadays to the creation of retailer alliances, which are created to make even more stronger their purchasing powers within the sectors. So only sectorial cooperation between farmers can help to rebalance such economic asymmetry within the food supply chain. Next slide, please. In fact, thanks to farmers' cooperatives, the sectors can have a better market access. This happens, as mentioned before, through concentration of supply, joint marketing and distribution, but also through joint acquirements of inputs. But most importantly, we can create a contractual leverages vis-a-vis those big buyers. And in addition to that, farmers, by cooperating, they become more efficient in production through better access to new technology, knowledge. We mentioned already risk management mechanism, finance, and so on. Because overall, what there is behind cooperatives, what cannot be achieved by one can be achieved by many. Next slide, please. Before entering this part and to address a bit the theme of today's event, it's also essential to state that agricultural cooperatives always strive to create sustainable value for all the stakeholders involved. So definitely for the owners, the farmer members, but also their employees, the consumers and the business partners. And most importantly, as underlined by Elizabeth, their territory, the communities in which they operate. But saying that, is also important to know that in Europe, agri-cooperatives create benefits also for their business partners. So beside the fact that we are on the different part of the value chain and somehow we are coping with imbalances that they have created, we create benefits for our business partners. In fact, a recent study by DG Agri of the European Commission clearly demonstrate that dealing with cooperatives and producer organizations can help also downstream operators to reduce transaction costs. They can lower uncertainty for their long-term planning. Fewer business relations means more stable prices, and a more efficient organization or delivery of supply is definitely linked to the way our agricultural cooperatives in Europe are able to respond to the needs of their B2B partners. And of course, our cooperatives can ensure better quality, traceability, safety, and more sustainability requirements. Next slide, please. So I created a bit this slide to explain that agri-cooperatives in Europe are becoming the longamanus of farmers in the entire value chain. They are starting operating in each link of the chain, and they build resilient business models that enables the enterprise and their farmers to prosper and grow. They are definitely the democratic tool in the hands of farmers to go from the land to the market. And thanks to their research and innovation team, in most of the case, our cooperatives are also able to anticipate consumers' needs. Next slide, please. So this map provides you with an overall view of the development of agri-cooperatives across the EU. As you can see, we have more than 23,000 enterprises, which are owned by more than 7 million farmers and they provide employment to 600,000 persons. The employment element is critical because it means we are providing employment opportunity in rural areas, which is the backbone of the EU economy. And we ensure that there is still those rural areas can remain alive. However, coming back to the key data, as you can see, there are like different numbers on it, country by country, but I would like to make some comparison that possibly could serve also to give some answer to the next slides data that I present on market shares. I would like to point it out, bring your attention on a few countries. For instance, you can clearly see that in my own country, Italy, we have about 4,700 cooperatives owned by 740 million farmers. While in the northern reality in Sweden, we have only 27 cooperatives owned by 160,000 farmers. So those two examples reflect a bit what is happening also in other Mediterranean countries or northern countries. While on the Eastern European part of the continent, we see that there is still a lack of development of agricultural cooperatives and most importantly of involvement of farmers in those enterprises. This is mainly due to historical reasons and especially also due to the lack of trust among farmers. And as we know, for cooperative enterprises, trust is the single point of failures vis-a-vis not only the farmers' members, but also vis-a-vis the market and the business partners. Next slides, please. So these slides, as I've already introduced, represent a bit of the level of market shares detained by agricultural cooperatives. As you can see, especially in northern countries like Sweden, Finland, Denmark, but also France, agricultural cooperative detains more than 50% of the market shares, while in Mediterranean countries like Italy, Spain, Portugal, the shares is much lower. It's between 20 and 50%. So why did I mention that possibly the previous slide could give some explanation to this one? Because it's clear that while in the northern countries, we see a high level of integration with a small number of highly specialized and large agri-cooperatives. In the southern country, we still see a high level of automation. Yes, there is a sort of integration through the creation of second degree cooperatives, but still compared to the bigger large cooperative, we still see a limited economic dimension. And as I mentioned, then there is the reality of the new EU member states where, for historical reasons, we have a quite limited development and market shares. Thank you very much. I'm here for questions from you, Mia, and in the future from all the other participants. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Umberto, for these reflections. Some of the things I picked up is that you highlighted also that cooperation between farmers can bring advantages to the rest of the food supply chain. I think that's very important as well to highlight. You also took us through some of the regional differences of how farmers are organized across Europe, and I think that data is very interesting for us to see and understand going forward. If there's anybody that has a question specifically on the European context to Umberto, then please feel free to put it in the chat and we can pick up on that question a little bit later. I have a quick follow-up question for you, Umberto. On the structural, persistent structural barriers that cooperatives face in Europe, what would they be today, according to you, and whether they're legal, it's legal recognition. I don't think it's maybe so much about land rights, access to finance. It's not the same challenges that you see in, for example, in the African context. Could you just briefly highlight those for us, and then we can continue?
Yeah, when talking about structural barriers, we possibly need to make a differentiation between short terms and long term. Obviously, when we talk about short terms barriers, we may consider all the global elements coming into the play with availability of inputs and so on. Uh, but also from our perspective, because COGECA is an advocacy organization, there is also the elements of policy developments. Of course, for COGECA, what is fundamental is to make sure that at European level, there is a strong recognition of cooperative enterprises at their model. Is fundamental that this recognition is put in place in order to avoid that new policy developments and legislative files risk to jeopardize the model, a model which already deliver under the three pillars of sustainability. So under the economic aspect, but also under the social elements, as already I try to explain based on the presence of the rural areas and the investments made there, but also under the aspects of the environmental sustainability. And there we can witness so many stories and success projects that are delivering under the are delivering for the achievement of the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I invite you all to visit our website. We have an extensive publication where we collected so many case studies and new ideas for projects can come out. But then addressing a bit the structural barriers for the cooperatives, I would like to bring your attention a bit towards the medium-long term. And in my opinion, in the opinion of Copa COGECA, considering the extreme economic pressure that we're experiencing, considering the high level of cost of inputs, considering the climate-induced extreme weathers that our farmers are coping with, we need to consider then the fact that only the 12% of EU farmers are under 40 years old, meaning that is essential to make sure that there is a recognition of the importance of the sectors and also that these sectors remain attractive for a new career path for youth. And why it's so important for agricultural cooperatives? Definitely, agricultural cooperatives in Europe cannot deliver without farmers, but on the other hand, agricultural cooperatives will need the farmers to drive, young farmers to drive those enterprises and to be strongly involved in the governance bodies defining the future of the sectors. So these, in my opinion, are the important elements to bring forward in replying to your question.
Thank you very much for those additional reflections. So we'll definitely continue later with some questions for you. There are also questions that have come in the chat, I can see. But I want to move to our next speaker, who is Mr. Marco Camagni, who is the lead global technical specialist in producers, organizations, and rural development at the International Fund for Agricultural Development. And as Luisa mentioned earlier, also, IFAD was involved in the UNFSS summit process, the producers' declaration, but IFAD also does extensive work on supporting farmer organizations and cooperatives globally and at country level. So I'm very pleased to give the floor to Marco to share a little bit about IFAD's work on this, as well as emerging trends from your perspective, looking at this important agenda.
Many thanks, Mia, and again, thanks also from my end for the invitation to this webinar. Thanks also to the previous speakers for very interesting presentations. So, talking about IFAD, so IFAD is a UN specialized agency, but also is a multilateral financial institution. So, our basically core business is financing agriculture and rural development interventions in countries, in developing countries, mostly through sovereign loans to governments, but also with some grants. So this is really our let's say main activity. So we are also a technical team. So I'm part of one of the two technical divisions. One is called the Production Market and Institutions Division, and the other one is the Environment, Climate, Social Inclusion Division. So both of them are under the Office of Technical Delivery, so which is basically looking after the technical quality of the project that we design together with governments and then we supervise, no, during implementation. So our core business, as I said, is our portfolio of loans and grants. And from the very beginning, almost 50 years ago, IFAD has been working, with collective, I'll say, organized farmers, no, and farmers working in a collective way. So we work with groups, with organizations, with cooperatives. We don't work with the individual farmers. And the reason for that is exactly what was said before by the speakers, that no individual farmer can be successful in agriculture, in a very risky sector like agriculture, only by pulling together resources, expertise, competencies, they can be successful. So the cooperatives are of course one of the many models, in which farmers can be organized. I have to say up front that IFA doesn't preach for one model only. So basically our message is get organized, or actually, on the contrary, let's try to build on existing organizations. So our first approach is starting from an analysis of the landscape and understand how our target groups are already organized and try to strengthen this organization. If they are not organized, then we can think about helping them to get organized. And the other thing is to transition. No, many times in many situations in many countries, these farmers are organized, but in a very informal way. So one of the contribution that our projects are doing on the ground is really helping them to choose the best legal structure and then help them, accompany them in the process, which includes also legal advice, etc., to then formalize their organization in a way. Could be a cooperative, could be an association, could be many different ways. And that's fundamental because by formalizing, by getting a formal recognition also in the economy, they can engage with other type of stakeholders. So Umberto was talking about the advantages for a business entity, let's say, to get involved with cooperatives. Clearly, they cannot. Most of this organization cannot get involved with the informal groups. I mean, they need to have some sort of formality. They need to sign contract. They need to have some sort of minimum standards in place. So this is a fundamental, let's say, area of support. And clearly, governance is another one. No, so you promote organizational people, but you need to also look after their capacity to manage their organization. So a lot of capacity building, institutional strengthening is going into this, right? To make sure the money also that can be channeled to them is properly managed, but also the money they can make through their business is properly managed, right? And ensuring there is a democratic system in place, like both Luisa and Umberto were making reference to. It should be really democratic, it should be really transparent. So we really pay attention to these aspects. But let me go one step back. So our core business, as I said, is our portfolio IFAD loan and grants. So typically our project, most of them, like 75% of them, adopt a value chain approach. So basically we look, I think somebody said before, from the land, from the farm to the consumer. So the entire value chain. And we try to identify, I mean, of course, our target groups are mostly at the primary level, but as Elizabeth said, some of them, by getting organized, by getting more formal, they they start, moving up in the chain, right? So some of them are actually taking some of the value addition functions. So first of all, collecting of produce, but also some basic value addition, and of course marketing. And so this is a very fundamental point, because we want to understand to what extent they have this capacity, because clearly by moving up in the value chain, they can also get better margins, right? They can get better money from their produce. So this is another area in which our projects are intervening. So supporting them in going beyond primary production, no? Improving primary production, so including all the aspects that Umberto was referring to, so safety, quality, reliability in the delivery, traceability. All these are aspects that we support through our projects. But at the same time, as I said, moving up in the value chain. We also promote partnership with other actors in the value chain. So 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago, even a bit more, I'm one of the guilty people, because I was one of the authors of a publication, IFAD, which was basically creating a new concept, which was 4P, which stands for Public-Private Producer Partnership. So 4Ps. So we were putting, in evidence the P of the producers, because we, in the old, let's say, concept, we were always referring to PPPs, so public-private partnership, but we were missing the producers in this equation. So we were trying to make it more visible, producers, as one important actor in the equation, right? In the partnership. So promoting these partnerships is important, because clearly we cannot expect, in any case, and even the better cooperative, to do everything, right? So as they have to partner with other actors in the value chain under mutually rewarding and win-win, the famous win-win agreements, right, or terms. And this is the most difficult part, no? Try to make sure that it is really a win-win in place. Clearly, as I think Luisa said in the beginning, and probably also Elizabeth, I mean, the bargaining power is not there. So, I mean, there is an imbalance of power. So you need to also provide a lot of support to the organized farmers to get the chance to be more or less the same table, no, with the other actors in the value chain, negotiating prices, negotiating the volumes, etc. So this is a fundamental area, which is also very coherent, with what the UN Declaration of Food Producer was saying in 2021. Because Luisa, you made reference to two of the areas, no? And one of those was exactly about rebalancing power in the value chain. But also we work a lot on resilience, no? I mean, I think several speakers already made this point, but clearly, in the current context, the big threat is not only on market side, but also on the weather, no? On the climate. And all the other related aspects which makes agriculture a risky sector, right? So on that front, we work a lot on resilient production systems. We work a lot on agroecology as one of the solutions to promote, but also we work very much with bottom-up approaches. So we try to build on what farmers are already doing, to really give value to their practices, and if possible, build on those practices and perhaps improve those practices. So we also adopt a lot this so-called co-research approach, no, in which farmers are really part of the innovation, they're really part of the research, they're really a protagonist in this, and supported by of course some academic and evidence, no, but really starting from there, because they are in the front line. They fight every day with climate change. So most of the solution they already found. Maybe you need some fine tuning, right? Again, this is very coherent with the declaration. Resilience was number one in one of the pillars of the declaration. And clearly, I already made reference to governance and strengthening of the farm organizations. So let me just conclude by making reference to other two instruments here. So I already spoke a lot about our projects, because this is our bread and butter. But we have two complementary tools that are equally important. One is called Farmers Forum. This is a process that was created more than 20 years ago. Luisa knows very well, because WFO is one of the members in the steering committee, in the global steering committee. This was created at the demand of the farmers' organizations as a unique bottom-up space in which IFAD, farm organization leaders, and governments were able to have a continuous process of dialogue. So I'm again making reference to the concept of dialogue and policy influence that all the three speakers mentioned before. And this is a fundamental space in which we can identify issues, we can identify solutions, but more in concrete, we can identify how we can work together at different levels. So at the global level, at the regional level, and also at the country level. So we want to go in depth, in identify really at the country level what farm organization can do in the context of IFA funded operations. And the third element in this let's say, framework is actually are the called farm organization 4 programs. These are programs that were created like again 15 years ago or so, and then because they were very successful, initially just in one region, then they were replicated in all the regions. Now we have a global program which is called Farm Organization for Impact, funded by IFAD and other partners. And at the moment, the main partner is the European Union, but also in the past we used to work with a lot with the Swiss Cooperation, the French Cooperation, and other partners. And the farm organization are in the center of these programs because they co-design them and then they implement them. So they are really, they're in the driving seat. So the regional partners in the different regions are really our implementing partners. And why this is important? Because those programs, the main objective is to build capacity of farm organizations. So covering some of the aspects that we already mentioned, including access to finance that some of you mentioned before, access to climate finance, but also access to funding in general, to finance your business. So Elizabeth made reference to a number of models in East Africa, but this is an evolving area, how to find ways to incentivize the financial sector to finance agriculture in the rural area. This is still a challenge. How to find a way to reduce the risk, which is very high for many reasons. And so blended finance, all these solutions that we are exploring. And this program so that building the capacity of these farm organizations, which eventually they can become implementing partners of the regular IFAD funded projects. So in some countries, we managed to sign MOUs, tripartite MOUs, governments, IFAD, and farm organizations. For example, Senegal, Burundi, in Asia as well. So this is really, if you want, the culmination of the process. This capacity building programs were able to create, enough strong organizations to be considered by governments as a credible implementing partners for their sovereign loan funded operations. So we're talking about public money transferred then to farm organization. What is the advantage of this? Of course, better targeting, better effectiveness, and sustainability, because of course the organization will remain in the rural areas for many years while government change, if funding can be finalized. So this is really a fundamental element of continuity and sustainability in the rural areas. I stop here. Thank you very much. I'm of course available for further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marco, for highlighting IFAD's work in this area and for the different mechanism or instruments that you work through. Something that I picked up on, you mentioned that IFAD works also a lot on building the capacity of farmer organizations. And I'm wondering, I nudged you a little bit earlier about emerging trends and so on. Do you see that there is a change in the capacity building needs of farmer organizations today vis-a-vis a few years ago? There's a lot of focus on innovation, digitalization that has been referred to as well earlier in the discussion today. What would you say? I mean, can you see any changes in terms of capacity building needs of farmer organizations based on your experiences?
Definitely. I think also this is a reflection we are having together with our team, also with our partners. For example, with EU, we had a recent meeting with them. Clearly, the evolution, where we are going, also in thinking about the challenges we are facing, which are increasingly complex. We are in a very increasingly complex world. I mean, but also considering the fact that concessional finance is also under pressure because of many reasons, and public funds are also shrinking. I mean, the capacity of farm organizations to be really a solid, mature, and professionally managed organizations able to generate bankable business plans, which are then eligible for funding under different sources which are beyond the concessional finance. I think this is a fundamental, let's say, trend. And I didn't mention one of the new feature of our recent program with for IMPTA was referring before. We have under the institutional component, we have now a tool which goes farm organization assessment tool, which is mandatory for all the participating farm organizations, because the idea is to take a snapshot of their institutional capacities, also weaknesses at the beginning of the program, and to really tailor our capacity building to fill those gaps with the idea of graduating them or improving their capacity throughout the program in order for them to be at a different level, hopefully better level at the end, exactly because the idea is diversifying financing sources. That's for sure is one trend. You mentioned digital. For sure, this is an opportunity. Working with digital solutions in many ways. No, I think Elizabeth made reference to e-commerce platform. So I think under the pandemic, we discover much more. No, the use of e-marketing as one option, but also e-extension. No, also to provide extension services. And also information about climate through digital solutions. So there are multiple ways in which the digital innovation can be mobilized for sure, and this is again a very clear trend. Actually, in our recent strategy now we have even a target of projects which need to incorporate digital solutions as part of our, let's say, our intervention.
Thank you very much, Marco. We'll get back to you in a moment, I think, with some more questions. So I do see that there are some questions that have come in from the audience, and thank you very much for posting your questions. I wanted to pick up on one of them, which is related to coordination organized at the global level and across different regions. And I'm looking at Luisa. If you could maybe elaborate a little bit on this question. So I'm rephrasing it a bit. How is the World Farm Organization coordination organized at the global level across different regions, and what challenges do you encounter in coordination? I think that is an interesting question, and maybe you could also put it in relation to the whole UNFSS process that you've also been involved in. I'll give that possibility for you to respond to that question if you would like to.
Thank you very much, Mia. I reply with pleasure. Actually, it was a very intense and learning process for us. The coordination of the food producers organizations was conducted not only by WFO alone, but we did it together with Elisabeth Nsimadala, who was one of the leaders during that period, and also Esther Penunia from the Asian Farmers Association. So basically, the three organizations from Africa, Asia, and the global leadership of WFO together helped keeping an eye at the global level, but also in the regions. And this facilitated the participation and involvement of other farmers' organizations also at national and local level. And then we invited organizations like Copa-Cogeca, for example, to participate in the process as well, and other regions in Latin America and Oceania that were not mentioned before. So the coordination happened in a very structured way. It was not only WFO, but it was a network of organizations that really sat together around the same table. The coordination was also let's say, facilitated by the networks of farmers that are in place already. One of these is the Farmers Forum that Marco mentioned, the IFAD Farmers Forum, because there we have an international steering committee where the global and some regional organizations are represented. We have regional platforms. So what we have done basically is to leverage our experience of working together in other contexts and replicated to support the Food System Summit preparation. It was a very exciting thing to do, but at the same time, very intense work. One challenge that I would like to report, and this applies also to the implementation of the Food System Summit outcomes, is related to the fact that apart from the support that IFADs provided to the farmers' organizations to prepare the declaration and get involved in the process upfront, no other support was provided to the farmers to be involved in the Food System Summit implementation whatsoever. So, of course, this is something that we are experiencing as a limitation of our engagement, and everything that we do, it's on our own resources, including Elizabeth was mentioning the participation in the stock-taking moments, the participation in the coalitions, the participation in the pathways, design and implementation, and so on and so forth. Maybe on this there is a lot of margin for improvement. Thank you, Mia. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Luisa. So I see that there is another question in the chat that I wanted to pick up on, and that's from Dr. Yingfu Randi from Cameroon at the University of Buea, if I could pronounce that correctly. So noting that the agricultural landscape is shared between food crop farmers and livestock keepers, and this, as we all know, can sometimes cause tensions, conflicts, and so on. And the question is there a good strategy to implement cooperative farming to unify those potential types of farmers and revamping agriculture activities, stepping up food security? And I think that the question is more geared towards Africa. So I'm looking at Elizabeth. Do you have any concrete examples of, cooperatives that are working on both crop farming and livestock from your experience? And if you would like to elaborate very briefly on that question.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And I want to appreciate the question and also respond to it by sharing the experience from the Federation. The membership that I mentioned actually cover all the different value chains. So we are in crop, we are in livestock, we are in forestry, and we are also in fisheries. And actually, when you look at most of our members, they are in more than one value chain, and especially personally coming from Uganda, for example, and the region where I come from, Southwestern region, every crop farmer has at least 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 animals. And these would be either sheep or goats or chicken or cattle. So a number of cooperatives have a mix of both crop and livestock. I've also mentioned dairy. We also have those that are specifically in livestock. And these are some of the dairy cooperatives that are within the region. But also most important is some of our members that are typically in livestock, like the Kenya Livestock Producers Association. We also have the Djibouti Agro-Pastoralist associations, which are typically in livestock. But being in livestock, we've also introduced, as a federation, we've introduced cropping systems in some of these livestock communities. Like in Djibouti, we had an interesting goat breeding program. I think this was actually even presented at the UNFSS Plus 4 stock taking, where we actually exported dairy goats from Kenya to Djibouti. We created a breeding ground in the country, supported by FAO, supported by the government of Djibouti, but also by the Eastern Africa Farmers Federation and the National Farmer Organization. And because Djibouti is a dry area, we had to introduce, growing of pastures and also water harvesting. And this is across, different parts of our region and where we cover, like in Kenya, we have some practices, for example, in Kajiado area by some of our member organizations that are in livestock, but also in Uganda, in most of the cattle corridors, we are introducing the growing of pastures in those dairy producing regions so that, the crop, the animal farmers can as well move into crop production, because we are looking at food security, and it's not all the time that, a farmer can depend on livestock for food security. Thank you, and over.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for your response on that question. So we do not have so much time left in the webinar. It's about 8 minutes, but we'll try to make the best use of this time to still have a bit of a discussion. I see that there is a question in the chat as well, and I'm addressing that to all the panelists. If there's anybody or speakers who wants to say something, address that. What's the difference between using producers, farmers? What is that can they be used simultaneously or so on? So if there's anybody who wants to say something in relation to that. But I wanted also to pick up, so this is an open question to all the speakers so far. So when it comes to working on food systems transformation, the UN Food Systems Coordination Hub works very closely, of course, with the national conveners and the governments, and a lot since the stock take, since the summit in 2021 has also been building the capacity at national level on what does it mean to work within the food systems transformation agenda. And I'm curious to hear from you, based on, because some of you have been involved in this process as well, and you're working closely with farmer organizations. How do you see that understanding, that sensitization of the food systems transformation agenda has been picked up by farmer cooperatives and organizations, and not just focusing on production, increased production and more market access, but the whole dimensions of food systems transformation? If you could elaborate, I mean, you're free to take the floor if you would, but if somebody would like to elaborate a bit on what is the change that we can see in terms of this agenda at the cooperative level. I do not see Umberto. Do you?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, maybe I can take up on this question, because before I mentioned that there are so many projects happening at European level put in place by agricultural cooperatives, and we see important results. Results that they span from water management to reduction of emission and so on. But all those projects, they underline that there is an important lesson. And the lesson is about the fact that systemic change in the agri-food sectors requires more than just new tools, requires investments. It doesn't possibly require regulatory push, but what is fundamental to have it is a cooperative approach, because it addresses the long-term vision that sometimes is very difficult to have it as a single farmer who has to cope with the daily challenges that you cope. You need a structure, you need a professionalized governance and a vision that drive the whole cooperative membership base towards a very long-term goal.
Thank you very much, Umberto, for that reflection. Elizabeth, I see your hand is also up. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I would like to just add a little bit to what Umberto has just mentioned. But for me, what I see as very key and, coming out of this UNFSS 2021, then of course, plus the stock takes, is what I would call a strong conviction by everyone towards food systems. Because right from the producer organization, the cooperatives, actually, if you were to sample all the strategic plans currently from, farmers organizations and cooperatives, they're all anchored around food systems. And then, of course, we see this transformation also at national level with the national development plans, but also with organizations that are supporting food systems transformation. For example, we see at continental level, annually, we have the Africa Food Systems Summit, of course, also, which is sort of a drumbeat towards food systems transformation. Again, I think what I see as a gap, maybe not just to say only good things, especially coming from a regional, and I believe maybe Luisa would also have this as an issue to flag, is the fact that I see I would call it maybe like the center power or the concentration more at national level, like you've mentioned. The Food Systems Coordination Hub works more with the national farmers organizations. And yet during the process, all these independent dialogues, the Farmers' Declaration was led by the global, continental, and regional organizations. And we had specific what we would call commitments in the declarations that we were committing to. So even much as we are doing much at regional, global, and continental level, but we don't see where we fit in to bring maybe some of these interventions to be reflected, let's say, in whatever you're doing at the hub level. I think the only time we come in is during the stock take. And also at that level, we are only invited to speak in the forum. So we are not bringing in interventions, for example, for scaling, and also we
I'm unfortunately losing the connection with Elizabeth. Yes, Elizabeth, unfortunately, I think we will need to ask you to wrap up there because we cannot hear you well. Yes, okay. Unfortunately, we could not hear the rest of the intervention from Elizabeth. Look, I want to, it's very late now and it's almost, we're about to hit the timeline for today's webinar. But I wanted to give each of the speakers one last chance to just say, like, if you have two key takeaways from today's discussion, what would that be? It can also be like just a couple of words just for the audience to, take note of. And be very, very brief because we do not have a lot of time and I apologize for going a bit over time. So I'll start with Luisa. Your super short key takeaways.
Thanks, Mia. My takeaways is that the most important part of food systems is the S at the end, because it states that the full agri-food system, let's say, is a composition of many systems in which food production is only one, but it can have a driving seat. So let's invest on the food producers and farmer structures cooperatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Luisa. Umberto, your very brief key takeaways.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, the takeaways that for transformation and to provide a better response to the farmers' need, definitely cooperation, not only among farmers, but also with research institutions, financial institutions is fundamental.
Thank you. And then I'll go to Marco.
Thank you. No, maybe first takeaway, no, we confirm that what was the title of the webinar, no, I think cooperatives can indeed be a key actor for system transformation under certain conditions. I think that we discussed a lot of some of the areas that needed to be addressed in order for them to play this role. And the second point I want to raise is the demographic transition, no, which is extremely important. I think Umberto spoke about Europe, but the issue of youth is in every region. So it's very high in the agenda of every government. So that's really, really important for the future of agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Elisabeth, I'll try to see if you can come in again with your very, very brief key takeaways. I hope the connection is better now.
Yeah, thank you. I had actually just posted them on the chat. I think we need to embrace cooperatives as special purpose vehicles for food systems transformation and the transformation of our communities. We also need to embrace the 4 Ps that Marco spoke about, the public, private, producer partnerships. But also we need to have targeted and directed support to cooperatives and farmers organizations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with this, we are going to start the closing of today's webinar. And I'm not going to try to summarize what has been discussed. I asked for some key takeaways from our speakers. But this whole discussion has been recorded, and it will be online as well on our Hub YouTube stream later. And we will, of course, share it with you as well over email. I really want to take a moment to thank all the speakers, the World Farmer Organization specifically for this partnership, but a super thank you to all the invited speakers for your contributions today. It's been really a super rich, interesting discussion. I think this is a subject that merits more discussion, and we will definitely continue following up on this. I hope that it's been interesting for the audience as well, and I also want to thank the audience for joining this webinar. These are, as I said in the beginning, public webinars, so we organize a few of them each year, and the next webinar that the Hub is organizing will be later this year in September, and that will focus on the role of female farmers in food systems transformation. So we will be sharing some more information about that, but stay tuned, of course. With this, on behalf of the Hub, a big thank you, and hope to see you in our future webinars and dialogues and discussions. And have a really great day, everyone, and see you another time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.